International Media TV. Television that listens to you.
Hi, I'm Johnnie Burrell. Welcome to the program.
Good evening, everyone. Wait, now this is Oakland. Good evening, everyone. My name is Gene Wade, and I'm going to be your MC for this evening, and I've got the honor of introducing the speakers and making sure that we catch back up with the schedule, because I think we're about 11 minutes behind. Our first speaker today will be well, first off, let me thank you all for coming here this evening. This is an important lecture series and an important event in Oakland. And the message of Dr. King is as relevant today as it was 50 years ago. And I think you'll hear that theme throughout the evening. There is a lot of work to do. And this organization is dedicated to training young people to raise their consciousness, to train leaders, the next generation of social entrepreneurs, the next generation of civic-minded leaders. And that's not just about being smart. It's about having the moral courage to stand up and do what's right. See, that's the work we've got to do. And you're going to hear about that theme a lot this evening as each of our speakers come up, because as I prepared for this, what I found out was that in their own way, each of them represents that. So let me start with our first speaker this evening, who is Dr. Patricia Stanley. She's the interim president of Merritt College. And she's responsible today for ensuring that Merritt delivers on its message and its vision of training our young people and preparing them for leadership. I want to put into context for you, however, the importance of community colleges in California, because sometimes I think it gets lost. We focus a lot of attention on Ivy League schools, right? I went to one of those. Well, first I got my first degree from a housing project, and then I went to an Ivy League school. And what I realized was that my degree from HUD got me one thing, kind of attention, and then the one from the Ivy League school got me a different kind of attention. It was almost like two different universes. And what I realized is that there's also another group of people who are trying to get a higher education, where most people go, and it's a community college, right? So today in California, 70% of students attend community college, 70. Most people who get a college education in this country get it at a community college, not at an elite school, right? 70% of nurses, 80% of firefighters get trained at community college. 55% of graduates from Cal State, 28% of graduates from the UC system started at community college, right? Now here's the interesting thing. Sadly, because of budget cuts, nearly 500,000 people today are on wait lists in community college in California. That's more than 1% of California's population sitting on a wait list. And these are young people where this is their only option. So the work that Dr. Stanley and other folks are doing in higher education to try to make education available to the masses of people is critically important. It is a part of today's civil rights issue. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Patricia Stanley. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wade, Ambassador Young, Congresswoman Lee, Honorable Elihu Harris, colleagues and guests. I am so pleased to be the interim president of Merritt College during the time that we could sponsor this wonderful lecture. So greetings and welcome to all of you from Merritt College. We are delighted, of course, to have the Martin Luther King Jr. Freedom Center on our campus. As you know, Merritt has a rich history and is one of the 4 colleges in the Peralta Community College District that serves the Oakland area. Community colleges are all about providing community students the skills and knowledge they need to have a quality life. We believe we change lives through education. An important part of that education is also providing education and opportunities to participate responsibly in a democratic society. Merritt College's partnership with the Martin Luther King Jr. Freedom Center gives us the opportunity to fulfill our mission of lifelong learning by providing this special lecture this evening in the Barbara Lee and Elihu Harris lecture series. So I know we're behind. I will just say I bring you the very warmest greetings from Merritt College. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Roy Wilson, Executive Director of the MLK Freedom Center. MLK Freedom Center, just to slow it down a little bit, is a 10-year-old organization that was founded by Congresswoman Barbara Lee and Oakland community activist Ira Jenkins. It grew out of a struggle to get a park named after Dr. King. And from there, the effort evolved into the creation of a center to engage young people. Under Mr. Wilson's leadership, the center offers democracy education classes and programs that integrate student and youth into civic engagement and public service. Now, I've had the good chance of spending some time with Roy Wilson, and I asked him to sum up for me the message and the mission of the MLK Freedom Center. And he said to me, and looked me straight in the eye and said, our goal is to ensure that young people are empowered to become the producers of their own movies rather than actors in someone else's. We want them to be the masters of their destiny. He took his time when he said it. He looked me right in the eye. He was dead serious. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Roy Wilson to the stage.
Sisters and brothers, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Barbara Lee and Elihu Harris lecture series. To our sponsors, all of our sponsors, big and small, warm-hearted, thank you very much. Work like this cannot happen without the collaboration of all of us, and we're very grateful. To the Board of Directors of the Freedom Center, thank you for your constant support and constant work. To the religious and spiritual leaders of our community, thank you for getting us this far. To the electeds here, thank you for getting us this far. We have a long ways to go. We have a long ways to go. To Mr. Harris, thank you for your leadership over the years. Thank you for the guidance, not only for Oakland, not only for California, but for all in the United States, to be an exemplar of what service, public service is to our community. Thank you. Congresswoman Lee, it's an honor to be part of anything with your spirit and name on it. And thank you for all that you do for peace, for justice, and for democracy. We know that Oakland is a foundation for you so that you can make sure other congressional districts in our nation can strive to live up to the vibrancy and equality and justice focused here in Oakland. Thank you for your work. Just a brief comment. We talk a lot about passing the torch, passing the baton, and I wanted to get everyone in the room to help me acknowledge we have 16 schools and youth organizations, from middle schools, there's even an elementary school organized here, high schools, and college students that have come organized with staff and students. And I would like everyone to acknowledge that young people are on the case, on the job to serve America. Give the young people here a round of applause. And I was asked by the Congresswoman to ask a colleague to speak all of 10 minutes ago. So from the Martin Luther King Jr. Freedom Center, please give your applause to Jabari Lachelle.
Good evening, everybody. Oh, excuse me. Thank you all very much for being here, and thank you all for the work that you do today in a society that requires us to stay down when our voices are needed. Thank you, Congresswoman Lee, for being a leader and an advocate, for speaking for us in the parts of the world where we're not allowed to speak without getting in trouble, but we have you as the noble leader to make sure that we keep up alive. And thank you, Mr. Harris, for all the work that you have done. Ever since I joined the Freedom Center, you have been, as Congresswoman Lee and as Roy, a mentor for me to further develop a sense of going out and building a community with you all. And finally, thank you, Ambassador Young, for joining us tonight and being here and speaking to bring hope to everyone in the room so they may aspire to change hope into everyone else. We live in a nation where people have become misguided men with guided missiles. We've become a nation full of hatred when we suffer from the lack of love. So let us today, tonight, tomorrow, as we sleep, as we dream, continue to believe that with creating that sense to stop that lack of love, we will create equality. Thank you very much.
I'd like to take a minute to acknowledge some of the folks that haven't been acknowledged, that are elected officials that are here. And so some of these names you've heard, some you haven't. Obviously, Congresswoman Lee, Mayor Harris, Abel Gillian, Peralta trustee, I think you're here as well. Julie Waters, representing Assemblywoman Nancy Skinner. Victor Uno, who's on the Port of Oakland Commission. Doug Siglin, who's East Bay Regional Parks District. And Orania Storm, who is on the Board of Governors of the California Community Colleges. Thank you for being here this evening, all of you. Our next speaker this evening is the Honorable Elihu Harris. Mayor Harris was a California State Assembly member from 1979 to 1990, representing parts of Berkeley and Oakland, the cities of Alameda and Emeryville. In addition, he served 2 terms as mayor of Oakland and was the chancellor of the Peralta Community College District. So he's a long-time person. In fact, I would doubt that most people here need me to introduce him. You probably know more about him than I could talk about. But I want to say something just personal. Over the last year and a half or 2 years, I've come to know him personally as a friend and mentor. He serves on the board of Patton University, which my company has acquired to make part of a low-cost network of schools. And I'm a social entrepreneur, so people like me build relationships around 2 different themes. One of them is, how are you doing financially? What kind of entrepreneurial impact are you going to make? Can you grow? Do you have a balance sheet? The other one is about the social impact. Are folks learning? Are you getting them through school? Is this going to be transformative? And after the first meeting, during the first meeting, it became readily apparent to me that second theme was what our relationship would be built around. And he's someone that I've turned to when times are tough, and I have the days like everybody else in the world when you're trying to do something, you say, should I really be doing this? I mean, I could have had a V8, right? I'm doing this. I could have done a whole bunch of other things, but not this. And when I say that, I usually get a story and some encouragement and a person I can go talk to. And then when I talk to other people in Oakland, and I say, I was talking with Elihu Harris, and this is what he did, and this is how he said, people say, that's Elihu. That's what he does. And then they tell me a story. And that's happened at least 20 times or 30 times in the last couple of months. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Elihu Harris, Mayor Harris, to come up to the stage. Thank you.
Gene, thank you very much. When Gene said I'd been mayor of Oakland for 2 years, my first thought was, damn, seemed like 8. But I want you to know a little bit more about Gene, because I think it's really important. Not just because he's a young black man, because how many young black men do you know that have started a university? He is a graduate of Morehouse College, you can see. He went to Harvard Law School, and then he came out of the Wharton School of Economics. So first, young people, he prepared himself for what he's doing. He didn't fall into a hole, he climbed out of one to become someone who could make a difference in the world. He's already bought and sold 2 companies in the education area. Earlier this year, he bought Patton University. But I want you to say more important than that. He is offering education, all the classes you want to take for $200 a month for AA, BA, and MA degrees. Now, that's social engineering as an entrepreneur. So when somebody says, well, I can't get an education, well, you call Bill Riley or a Bell and you enroll in Peralta. And if you can't get in Peralta, you call Gene Wade. And you then look at how you can get an education in a field that will help you take care of yourself and your family and your community. That's my message about education, and I want you all to understand. We hear a young man come up here and speak as the young man did early this evening. You know what our future is all about, and you know where we got to make our investments. But I want you to understand, help is on the way, and Gene Wade represents that help. He didn't have to move to Oakland, but he did. Because a whole lot of people in the field would have been on Woodside or down the peninsula, and they say, where's Oakland? Over there. He's here. You know, when I heard that Ambassador Young was going to be here, I wanted to kind of tell you a story. When I was out of law school a couple of years, I got a job working for a congresswoman in Washington, D.C. And I'm sure Ambassador Young will smile at this. Her office is on the 5th floor of a Cannon office building. And when I came up to her office the first day, I saw a young man walking down the hall. And I said, excuse me, can you tell me where Congresswoman Yvonne Burke's office is? He said, well, it's right down here, not too far from my office. And he had a little boy named Bo. And they were walking down the hall, and I said, well, thank you very much. He didn't say who his name was, and I certainly didn't know. But when I got to Yvonne Burke's office, I said, yeah, it was a nice young man, probably works down the hall somewhere. And he was with his little boy, Bo. He said, that was Congressman Young. I said, okay. I thought he was another staff guy, because he didn't look any older than I did. And he still doesn't look any older than I did. But at any rate, you know, that's the kind of person that our guest speaker is. He is someone who has always been of the people and for the people. And not only hearing him tonight, but looking into his history, you're talking about a person who epitomizes a life of service. That's Andrew Young. He has not only been, as you know, a minister and a leader in the civil rights movement, but a member of Congress and at the UN. And somewhere along his illustrious career, he lost his mind and ran for mayor. I mean, that's the only hole I saw in his whole program. You know, I used to tell people, you know, that if I had been smart, I wouldn't have run for mayor. I would have stayed in Sacramento and died a natural death with term limits. But the reason we're having the lecture series, and it's really important that I emphasize this, is because every day, Ambassador Young, Martin Luther King, and so many others, some of whom you've met, some of whom you heard of, some of whom are unsung, their legacy is on the line. And too many of us act like things they fought for, not only hard fought, but they are somehow now part of a legacy that will continue no matter what we do. And we forget our obligation to continue that legacy with blood, sweat, and tears. I'm not talking about Occupy Oakland. I'm talking about do something for Oakland. I'm talking about do something for the poor. Do something for those. When you have the amount of murders we got in Oakland, almost all of whom are young folks, then you understand we got a crisis. We don't need to go to Afghanistan or Iraq or anywhere else to fight a war. We're fighting the war every day on the streets for young people's lives and their souls. That's what this lecture series is all about. Because when we think about Martin Luther King's dream, we have to worry about whether or not, at least in this city, in this country, whether or not it's going to become a nightmare. Because the reality is we're getting farther and farther away from the goal of social justice and economic equality. The poor are getting poorer. Those who are not educated are getting less educated. Their literacy rate is on the rise. You know, if you don't think this is a crisis, God, tell me what is. So let me just say this. We come to learn, Ambassador Young. We come to listen, and then we come to work. Thank you.
Gives me great pleasure to introduce another Lion of Oakland, Congresswoman Lee. And I'm not going to do the long introduction because, again, many of you know a lot about her. She was born in El Paso, Texas, and growing up in the segregated South, she learned at an early age the importance of standing up for one's beliefs and fighting for equality. And she's done that throughout her career. 1998, she was elected to Congress, as many of you know. And shortly after she was elected in 2001, she was presented with a choice. Do I support military action in Iraq or don't I? And she decided to stand alone and make a vote against it. There were a lot of things to talk about her background, but that encapsulates it. It's moral courage to do what's right in the face of tremendous odds. That's leadership. And I think that says it all about what leadership is. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Congresswoman Lee to the stage.
Wade, thank you so much for that very warm introduction, but also thank you for being here in Oakland. We look forward to working to make sure that our young people are educated so that they too can live the American dream like so many have benefited from as a result of Ambassador Young and Dr. King and all of those who came before us. So thank you again so much. I'm so glad to be home for a minute, and I just want to say thank you for being here tonight. And there is good news in Oakland. You know, there's a lot of good news in Oakland. And I just first have to just say to Roy and to Karen and to our young people at the Martin Luther King Freedom Center, you make me so proud. These young people are awesome. They're unbelievable. You know, every year I go to Montgomery, Birmingham, and Selma, Alabama. We take a pilgrimage with Congressman John Lewis, and we march across that Edmund Pettus Bridge, and we visit those sites that really were the places where Reverend Young, Ambassador Young, fought and struggled so that we could just have the right to vote. So we do this every year, and these young people go with me, and I tell you, they come back to this community and they make such a difference, not only in their lives and lives of their families, but in the lives of their community, because they understand that violence is not an option. And so our Martin Luther King Jr. Freedom Center really is a center for nonviolence and conflict resolution. And there's so many young people in this city who get it. And so I have a lot of hope as a result of our young people. So give all of our young people a round of applause. And I have to just say to Dr. Stanley and to Merritt College, you know, I am so proud of our Peralta Community College system, and Elihu, as our former chancellor, did an amazing job, not only as chancellor, but as mayor, as assembly member, as congressional staffer, as executive director of the NBA. He's my friend, as you know, but he put Peralta on a track for the 21st century. And I just have to thank you for that. Merritt College, if you don't know, has been designated a predominantly black institution. We don't have great historical black colleges in our community. We don't have our great universities here. But we have Peralta and we have Merritt College. And so Merritt is positioned to do quite a bit for our young people as a result of our federal designation now. And so I just want to thank you, Elihu. It happened under your watch. So thank you again for your leadership. I have to just say to you, this lecture series this year has been, they've been informative, they've been inspirational, they've given us all a reason to get out there and continue to do the work that Ambassador Young and Dr. King began on our behalf. All of you, I think, have come not only to hear the wisdom of these great, great leaders, but also to learn and to take what we can and go out and make this a better community and a better country and a better world. And so I'm so pleased to see so many of you here tonight, because I know you came here to learn, but you also came here to act. And you came here to leave this place to organize and mobilize so that we can ensure the American dream for our young people. And so Andrew Young and Ambassador Young, I just have to say, I was in D.C. working for Ron when Elihu was working for Yvonne, and there you were as a member of Congress. And I remember I was awestruck, because I knew Ambassador, then Congressman Young's work with Dr. King. And I knew the price he paid, and I knew the sacrifices he made, and I knew the struggles that he went through just so I could be then a member of Congressman Ron Dellum's staff. Shirley Chisholm, Barbara Jordan. I had the privilege to know all of these wonderful people, but it was Andrew Young who really helped me understand that, yes, our work for peace and justice was really just beginning, and that we had to continue to do this work if, in fact, we were going to be true to the ideals of Dr. King. And so, as I ask Ambassador Young to come forward, I just have to say he has been congressman, ambassador, mayor, Andrew Young. He has taken Atlanta to the next level. I mean, Atlanta is, if you haven't been there recently, it's a wonderful, progressive city. There's so much of that. The seeds were planted when he was mayor. But also, he is a person who really understands that all politics is local, but he's a global leader. He's a global leader. And I have actually met with Ambassador Young in South Africa and other places around the world, because he's there being a peacemaker. He's there trying to encourage trade between minority companies and companies in Africa, all over the continent. And so he's an amazing human being who's an internationalist, but who also is continuing to beat that drum to eliminate racism, war, and poverty. And so he's still on the home front, working each and every day on our behalf. Ambassador Young, come forward. I want to thank you, Mrs. Young and Andrea Young. The whole family is here. Thank you all again. Give Ambassador Young an Oakland round of applause.
Thank you very much.
I look around and I see so many friends of long standing. They're not old friends, but I remember running down the halls with my son, and I had him because my wife said, "You wanted this boy. Take him out of here before I have to wring his neck." And so I brought him to Congress with me, and he ran up and down the halls, and all the other offices, kind of nursed him along. And he didn't do very well in school, but he's learned a lot of life's lessons. And one of the projects that he's involved in now is this TV network basically designed for poor black people who can't afford cable, called Bounce. And you can still get Bounce with rabbit ears and get very good programming. So thank you for it's on KATXT1, but anyway. And then I looked around and I see Dr. Ruth Love, and I realized that on the battlefield of our time, it's always been about education. And if we don't win the battle of the books and the dreams and the ideas, we end up with nothing but a mess of pottage. We cannot live on simple material blessings. And one of the things that happened in our civil rights movement is that people got successful and they thought that being free meant being rich, and that being rich meant wearing labels. And so they had to have Louis somebody. They can't even pronounce his name, and Gucci and Ferragamo, and I mean, they don't feel like they dressed, see? And they made Levi's. We used to get Levi's for $2. Levi's $135 now. I mean, materialism is not the answer. And Dr. King used to put it quite bluntly in his casual moments and said, if you think integration is just taking the wine and the gin that you've been drinking on the corner in a brown bag and putting it in a little fancy glass and call it a martini, you really haven't gotten anywhere. But I also look in the back here and I see a young lady that kind of helped me when she first got out of school, and then she took on a real challenge, and that is marrying one of the brilliant lawyers of our time. I'm talking about Jane Bond Moore and Howard Moore. Jane's father did his PhD dissertation on Perry County, Alabama. And Perry County, Alabama is the place that may be more responsible for the civil rights movement than any place else. I always say that if Martin Luther King had married any of the girls he was going with at Spelman, or if I had married any of the girls I was going with at Howard, you never would have heard our names. We both got real lucky and blessed and married two little country girls from Perry County, Alabama. And so did Ralph Abernathy marry a little country girl from Perry County, Alabama. Now, we didn't know each other, but they knew each other. But they weren't scheming up on us, because none of them wanted to be bothered with preachers. And yet, out of the Well, see, I'm old enough not to think of it as chance. It's not an accident. I say coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. And when I see things happening that don't seem to go together and all of a sudden they begin to fit, I look for the hand of the Lord. And that's why I think we've been able to see things that other people can't see. And I've been given the title, selected the title, I Dream a World That Works. Now, we have a wonderful world. It really is. And it works for some people. But it doesn't work well enough for enough people to make it survive, to let it survive. If we continue to go the way that we are going, with the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, and nobody caring about anybody else, we go into hell in a handbasket. But we could have said that in the South years ago. And yet we always saw something that nobody else could see. And I think it was a gift of God. Martin Luther King's dream was not his dream. He got that dream at Morehouse. And before Morehouse, it was Dr. Mays in a cotton field. And Howard Thurman studying mysticism. And I remember being 9 years old and going down to the federal courthouse, and a tall, skinny fella was standing up there arguing about how much teachers ought to get paid. Because in Louisiana, black teachers had twice as many students in their class, and they got half as much salary. And this young man got up there, and I couldn't understand what he was saying, but he was tall, he was good looking, he was black, and he was smart. And his name was Thurgood Marshall. And this was 1941. He was right out of law school. And the thing that impressed me was that he would call out the cases, and the legal aides and the judge would start running looking for books. And when they'd come back in that book, he said, "I think you'll find that on page 692. I said, "Damn, that brother is, I ain't never known anybody like that, you know?" I say that to say that anything we did in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s or now had started long before we were born even. And that we are building on a legacy of hope. We're building on the dreams of slaves. We're building on people who really and truly believed that God would make a way out of no way. Hosea Williams said something very profound after Dr. King's death. And he said it to Martin Luther King III. When Martin came to see him, and Martin was coming to fuss with him because he had said something about his mama, and it wasn't the dozens, but it was just, you know, but we never liked strong women. And Coretta was a strong woman. And she was getting in other folks' way, and Jose said something about her, and Martin came to talk. Martin III was a young man, came to talk to him, and he said, before he got a chance to give her his complaint, he said, Jose welled up in tears. And he said, "I want to thank you for your daddy." He said, "Your daddy made it possible for me to be a man. And if it hadn't been for your daddy, I couldn't have been a man." He said, your daddy taught me to conquer the love of wealth and the fear of death. And because of that, I'm able to be a man. And I think that legacy is what we're building on. But Dr. King used to say that it's never a steady climb to the top of the mountain. It's always hills and valleys. And we have to have a sense of direction. We have to be guided by certain stars so that when it's dark and lonely and we're lost, that we still can get a sense of direction and see where we are being led. We did not know what we were doing. Anybody that says that Martin Luther King sat down and planned to go to Montgomery and planned to recruit Rosa Parks, I mean, none of that. I mean, he went to Montgomery trying to stay out of the movement. He didn't want to get in politics. He picked the most sedity little church with a whole bunch of college professors, and he wanted to be quiet and finish his PhD dissertation. And he did. But 3 weeks after he mailed in his dissertation, Rosa Parks sat down in the bus. Now, he told me that when they had the meeting to decide who was going to be the leader, he was sure it was going to be Ralph Abernathy, and there was a big, powerful Methodist preacher, and he was in the back running the mimeograph machine, doing the handbills to make for the boycott. And they came back and told him that, again, a group of women had gotten together and had gone to Mr. E.D. Nixon, who was the head of the NAACP, and convinced him not to let these two preachers, Methodists and Baptists have been fighting for a long time in the South. I know they don't fight up here. But said, why don't we let this young man kind of lead the movement, because he hadn't been here long enough for anybody to get angry with him. So at 7 o'clock, they voted him the head of the Montgomery Improvement Association. And he had to get up at 8 o'clock before a mass meeting larger than this. And he had to define a movement with no time to make any notes, no time to prepare. But you ought to download the autobiography of Martin Luther King on your iPod or your iPad or whatever the doohickey you got, and listen to the autobiography of Martin Luther King that Stanford University put together. I think it's listed under Clay Carson. And the reason I say do that is because what they've done at Stanford is they've taken the words of Martin Luther King from a lot of books, and they put them together in his words, but then when it comes time for him to make a speech, they actually have him doing the speech. So you hear the speech of a 26-year-old man that had less than 2 hours to prepare, and you see him get up before a crowd that is mad, wanting to fight, coming out of the Second World War, and they were ready to do battle over Rosa Parks being put in jail. And he had to calm them down and reason with him, but not put them back to sleep. He had to take advantage of that moment and build the hopes and dreams in a disciplined way that they were able to sustain a bus boycott for 381 days. Now that's 50,000 black folk that had never ever agreed on anything before. They were as bad as you think you are. If there are 50,000 black folk, there's 60,000 opinions. And depending on what day it is and who you're talking to, that's the opinion you take. But somehow, for 381 days, they got together. Now, if it could happen in Montgomery in 1955-56, anything you can dream and believe. That's one of Jesse Jackson's quotes. If you can conceive it and believe it, you can achieve it. And I think we've got to quit complaining and see the world not as it is. That's a Robert Kennedy. Some people see things as they are and ask why. Others see things as they are and ask why not. And so another one of Dr. King's quotes was when people gave him an analysis of an election or something like that, he said, one of the things I learned at Morehouse is that there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. And if you believe in the statistics, if I had believed in the statistics, I could not have gotten elected to the Congress because it was a majority white district. And black people don't turn out to vote. And so if I had taken a course in political science, I'd have had sense enough to know I shouldn't run. But I wasn't a good student, and I got my degree, at Valina C. Jones School. That was the poorest school we had before there were even projects to put people in. That was the school where people went to where they still had outhouses and pumps in the backyard. But that's where I got my education. And the thing is that you have to find a way to believe that if it's the right thing to do and you devote yourself to it, you can do it. And I ended up getting pushed into that race and working as hard as I knew how to work, had less money, didn't really know what I was talking about, but I was sounding good. And I knocked on doors and I ran up and down the street shaking people's hands. And then on the Monday night before Election Day, it started raining. And it was a rainy night in Georgia. It was like, y'all don't have rain like that here. I mean, the heavens just opened up and it rained all night long. I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning to see whether my poll workers were going to show up. It was pouring down rain. I said, Lord, why did you do this to me? I deserve better. And the papers had said on Friday that I was down in the polls by 4%. And only, no way I could win. Because black folk were not going to go out and vote, and white folk wouldn't vote for somebody black. When we got through, we had a 74% black turnout in a pouring down rain. And about 14% of the white folks who had never voted for anybody black, they didn't even vote for Democrats, had somehow managed to vote. And I ended up winning an election that was impossible. But that was not the first of the impossible thing. It was impossible to go to Birmingham and change Birmingham. And we failed in Birmingham. Everything we tried to do that we knew what we were doing didn't work. We had a master plan. The only thing that worked was the boycott. And we did get 300,000 folk not to buy anything but food or medicine for about 90 days. But people went to jail. We didn't have money to bond them out. And then even the black leaders came to Martin Luther King and said, you have to admit that you were wrong. Birmingham is not ready. And you need to call this off and say that nonviolence won't work in Alabama. And maybe you can come back in a few years, but right now you need to go raise some money to get these people out of jail. And the reason they were worried was they had put their names on the bonds, and their homes were all extra mortgaged because they had signed the notes to get as many of these folk out of jail as we could. We still had 500 and some folk in jail. And Martin said, no, I'm sorry, you're probably right. We probably have failed, but I can't just leave people in jail. So he went to jail, and everybody says, when are we going to get together like you all were together in the South? Well, we had nobody. 4 preachers out of 400 showed up. And a total of 55 people went to jail with Martin Luther King. And after that, we thought it was all over, till Bull kind of put the fire hose and the dogs on us, and everybody got all worked up, and then they wrote a nasty full-page ad in the paper about Martin Luther King by a bunch of preachers, and he just got worked up in jail. And it was like a fire pent up in his bones, and he started writing an answer to this ad. He didn't have any paper, so he wrote it around the margins of the paper, of the New York Times. And when he ran out of New York Times space, he started writing on the toilet paper. And what came out was the letter from the Birmingham jail. Now, I could tell you stories like this all night long, but that's not the point. The point is, where do we go from here? See, we have been willing to give up and give in too soon. But we're on the verge of a new world. And it's a world that we will either influence and control, or a world that will destroy us. It's a world where people all agree that your congresswoman was crazy. But I ask you, and my daughter said this one day, can you imagine what would have happened if we had known that we were going to spend almost $1 trillion in Iraq? And if we had decided not to go to war, but to invest and plan and develop Iraq and Iran and Afghanistan. And Charlie Wilson, who was in Congress with us, actually did. If you go to movies and see Charlie Wilson's War, he's crazy and he's wild, and it's all true. But in the final analysis, after getting guns for the people in Afghanistan, he asked for simply $5 more million to start schools. And the Congress ignored him. And so we have got to find a way to solve the problems of this world without violence. And we can start right here. I remember one day I was riding my bike and didn't have on my fancy clothes, and I saw a bunch of thugs standing on the corner, and I started to turn and go another way. I said, what is the matter with you? You stood up to the Klan and white folks that were set out to kill you, and now you're going to turn away from young black men? And so I rode my bike right up in the middle of them. I said, hey, brothers, what y'all up to? They were so pleased. They didn't know who I was, see, because I had on a bicycle helmet. And I finally took it off. They said, oh, you the mayor. I said, yeah, just what y'all up to? And I sat there and I talked with them for 15, 20 minutes. See? And then went on about my business. But we cannot be afraid of our own children. And if if we decided that it was worth us dying in order that our children might be free at the hand of white people, it doesn't make any difference whose hand pulls the trigger. And it might take some of us dying, confronting these young people and letting them know that we intend to love the hell out of them. That we care about them. And they are bright. The ones that are the most difficult are the ones that are the smartest. And it's because black men get pushed out of school rather than educated. But I always tell teachers that, that if my daddy hadn't been a dentist, I'd have been put out of school and in the street. But my daddy could get me back in school every time I screwed up. And there, but for the grace of God, I'd have been out there in the streets. But everything that got me in trouble in school, Elihu, it's the inability, attention deficit disorder. Is that what y'all call it? That's being able to take care of 2 or 3 things at a time. When you're the mayor, you better be able to multitask. You better be able to take care. If you're running a business, you better have 8 or 10 things on your mind and 2 or 3 more on the back burner. And the very things that make it difficult for us to learn as young men are the things that make it easy for us to be successful if we can get through that testing period. And the testing period is the police. The testing is the fact that people who hate each other in their neighborhood take it out on those closest to them. Down south, I used to preach about it all the time, because in my little church, the man would come home and he'd been mistreated by his boss man, and he'd come home fussing with his wife. She hadn't done anything. He's mad at the white man for messing with him all day long. She slaps the biggest child upside the head. He picks up on the little one. And then the little one goes out and kicks the dog, and the dog runs out in the yard and chases the chickens. Now, there's a version of that happening in Oakland. Everybody that's mad on the street, it didn't come from within them. It came from somewhere way back. And we have to realize that violence is systemic in our society. And it's not individual, and you don't deal with it one at a time. You deal with it like Thurgood Marshall dealt with segregation. You deal with it by challenging the legality of some of the things that they accuse us of that lock young people up. You challenge the intelligence of spending $50,000 a year to keep somebody in jail when you could educate them for $15,000. And I think we're on the verge of being able to do that. Now, we put an awful lot of burden on our elected leaders. And whatever's wrong, we want them to fix immediately. Now, when I got elected mayor, I was sworn in at 10 o'clock in the morning. I got to City Hall about 12:30. At 1:30, 2 o'clock, all of my boys from SCLC were out there picketing me. Singing, "Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go." And I went out there and I said, what is the matter with you all? They say, "Ain't nothing the matter with us. You Pharaoh now." And you got to do something for our people right now. And they kept my feet to the fire. Now, we kept John Kennedy's feet to the fire. We kept Lyndon Johnson's feet to the fire. That's why we got those civil rights bills. We liked Bill Clinton too much. We let him slide. And he did what he could and what he wanted to do, and everybody loved him, but we protected him more than he protected us. Now, we don't know what to make about the present president, but we know what to make about the challenger. And so I don't care what you think of what has happened. It seems like things are going much better than I ever imagined. Now, I was born in 1932. I remember Pearl Harbor, and I remember soup lines, and I remember the hobos coming from the railroad and coming up the step, and my grandmama always had a pot of red beans, a gumbo on the stove, and she would take a loaf of French bread and take the thing out, and she'd make a gumbo sandwich, a red bean sandwich. It was rough along there. It didn't get better till after the Second World War. And it took Roosevelt. Roosevelt was elected 4 terms before he straightened out this country from a recession. And we want this young man to straighten it out in 4 years when everybody there is working against him. And I just want you to know that we are going to win this election. But that's just the beginning of the fight. And the problems that he is going to have to face, that we are going to have to face, cannot be solved the way they were solved before. The problem is we don't have enough jobs. You can't create jobs around the world with a war. You have to generate businesses. You have to generate capital. And the Gallup polls say that there are 1.2 billion jobs in the world, if you define a job as 30 hours a week year-round. Just 1.2 billion. We got 7 billion people. 1.2 billion can't support 7 billion. We need immediately at least another 1.8 billion jobs. And so we got to figure out a way to create jobs. Now, we did it in Atlanta, but we were blessed. We were blessed because even before W.E.B. Du Bois got, famous, he was down there teaching. Benjamin Mays had raised a generation. We had 5 or 6 generations of people going before us, laying the groundwork. We even had black folk and white folk working together in Georgia because they decided there were not enough progressive white folk to move the city forward. So Mayor Hartsfield in the 40s went out to the historically black colleges and said, look, we need to form a coalition between the black intellectual and religious community and the white business community. And so it's not like I was mayor and did a whole lot. Mayor Hartsfield had started in the 40s, putting black folk and white folk together. And then Ivan Allen came after him, and we put Ivan Allen in. And then Sam Massell came after that. And all of us, though, essentially had the same development plan. And it was the business community, the Jewish community, and then in 1973, Maynard Jackson became the first black mayor. I had become the first black congressman in 1972. So we had it going on. I mean, we could call Washington back then, and we could get what we wanted, and we could get what we needed, and things were working. And then all of a sudden, it all broke up, and we haven't figured out where we are yet. But I'm saying that on November the 8th, when the votes are counted, that's when our work begins. I'm giving them 2 days to argue about it. And I didn't say the day we voted. I said the day is cleared up. So that's it. Remember, it took weeks before they cleared up Bush. But we're going to have to start off. Now, the one thing we know, one, we have enough human need in the world. We also know that we have enough talent and technology in the world. We know that God has put enough natural resources in the world so that if my father has cattle on 10,000 hills, ain't no reason why everybody ought not be able to eat steak. And that's not communism. That's free enterprise, because there's enough wealth in the world. If the wealth and the technology and the ideas come together, there's no problem we can't solve. Now, just let me take a minute to say why we are not solving it now. Google 21 trillion. And I ran across that in Forbes magazine. And I ain't in a liberal magazine. But an African brother bought Forbes Africa and started and asked me to come over for the inauguration. And I got to reading in Forbes, and Forbes is looking at Africa. And I said, if these conservative white folk are looking at Africa, there's something's going on here that we're missing. And then I realized that 6 out of the 10 fastest growing countries in the world are in Africa. That's according to Forbes. And that if African countries are growing faster than China or India. And we think a billion Chinese can get scared, but there are 2 billion Africans. We just never put them all together. But when you put these 54 countries together, by 2025, the largest middle class on the face of the earth will not be in America, will not be in Europe, will not be in India or China or Latin America. If things continue as they're going now, and they're going bad now, the fastest growing middle class will be in Africa. So that means all of these young thugs need to get ready. They need to go to your school. They need to learn something, because there's going to be job opportunities there. The resources of the world that are there to save the world are on the African continent. And I've been wondering for a long time, why did God bring us here and leave us and make us suffer for 400 years? Hopefully so we can get strong enough to save the world. And a long, long time ago, a fellow by the name of Toynbee said in his 17 volumes of History of the World that if America makes it, the difference will be the African influence that has come into America and blended with what happens in Europe. And we have to add to that the Hispanic influence and the Asian influence and the Native American influence and all the influences that have conglomerated here that can potentially make this nation. It's already made it the greatest nation on the face of the earth. We just have to get ourselves organized. And organizing means, first of all, getting the politics in order. We'll take care of that within a month. Won't you? Okay. Then we got to figure out how to get these people who are hiding their money. So that $21 trillion, that's the low estimate of the amount of money in tax havens. And they ain't doing nothing. I mean, Switzerland isn't all that rich. But they keep people's money. And even the Cayman Islands and Bermuda, they hide money down there so they don't have to pay taxes on it. Well, they're not making any money on it. Now, the way we figured out to make Atlanta grow was, I'd been on the banking committee and I knew that there was at least $500 billion in these banks that came from the oil countries. And the oil producing countries are places like Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, but also Angola and Nigeria and Indonesia and they were getting more money than they could spend. And so the way we got Atlanta going was we went to the places where we found them hiding money. And we said, you can invest it with us. And you can invest it and make money. And all you have to do is employ all our people and make sure that you don't discriminate against race, creed, gender, or national origin. And we will guarantee you honest, efficient return on your investment. And it worked. That's why we jumped from 1 million people to 6 million people. And the Olympics wasn't an accident. It happened because of the 72 countries that had Olympic votes. We had 55 of those countries represented in the city of Atlanta, and they by people who were doing well and making money. And the Africans came and they saw all the black folk, and I said, look, it's not our fault that you sold us into slavery. I said, if we had stayed on the African continent, you'd be voting for us, so we need all the Africans to vote for Atlanta as though it were an African city. And that's what gave us the Olympics. And that sparked another spurt of growth. Now, with that 21 trillion, that's 3 times the economy of China. That's equivalent to the US and Japan put together. That's greater than all of the resources in Europe. Now suppose you shut, the economy of Europe almost collapsed because Greece shut down. And Greece is less than $1 trillion. Nigeria is in trouble because Nigeria has a almost $2 trillion economy, but they have put almost $1.9 trillion into these tax havens rather than invested in their own country. Angola has probably done worse. See? Indonesia. And what we have to do is to find safe, profitable, secure, and honest places to meet needs. And we need an executive leadership in the White House. Now, before Ron Brown died, we had a plan to change the Middle East because the Kuwaitis have a lot of that money. And Ron Brown got 300 members of Congress to agree that the U.S. should do what we did in Berlin. The way we brought down the Iron Curtain was we made free enterprise and democracy work in Berlin, and then they broke the wall down trying to get to it. We said all we have to do is take the Kuwaitis' money. The Kuwaitis give every man who's 21 years old gets an automatic housing allowance of $250,000 when he turns 21. But he has to build a house in Kuwait. And they have 50 to 75,000 kids turning 21 every year, and they only build in 1,000 or 2 houses in Kuwait. So we said, we know how to build houses. We can get American contractors, and we can train Kuwaitis, and we can build the city of the future with your money. And it'll create jobs for everybody in this region. And you have the best hospitals, the best universities, the best shopping, the best airports. You have a fiber optic cable under the sand so that everybody has a house like Bill Gates. So that anything invented in the next 50 years, they already got a plug for it. If you create that right on the border of Iraq and Kuwait, you don't have to go to war anymore. People will come there to learn. They'll come there to get healed. They'll come there to shop. I mean, we just have to think and dream. And I can think of a dozen of these around the world that if people were willing to risk their money and work together, and we have the institutions, but the last one with vision in those institutions was Ralph Bunche. And Ralph Bunche in the 30s and 40s was riding around Africa trying to figure it out. And he almost wrote the UN Charter single-handed and wouldn't take credit for it. When they tried to give him the Nobel Prize, he wanted to turn it down. And yet, he had a vision to make the world work in the United Nations. And you put the World Bank together with that, and you get all of these phony Europeans out of control of it, and bring some people in from around the world. And there's almost no problem that we can't solve. Now, I don't know what you think, but I grew up to believe that I don't know what the future holds, but I know who holds the future. And I know we have come through many dangers, toils, and snares by God's amazing grace. And I don't know about you, but I don't feel no ways tired. I was in New Hampshire last night before last, and we had a bunch of about this size, and half of them were Republicans. And the president had twice that many out in noonday, but he wasn't talking to Republicans. And I had a chance to talk to 1,000 Republicans. And I hope they heard what you're hearing, that we can work together and make this world a home for all God's children. And so let me close with one of my favorite spirituals, who happened to have been written by a gay preacher, and without whose spirit and song our churches would be much poorer. But Brother James Cleveland said, "Lord, I don't feel no ways tired." We've come too far from where we started from. And nobody told us that the way was going to be easy. But I don't believe he brought us this far to leave us.